While I was on vacation, my daughter and her new boyfriend brazenly moved into my house as if it were already theirs. When I returned, they taunted me, saying, "You can live in the doghouse." I just smiled, locked the door, and replied, "Actually, the house." They got angry, saying, "What's so funny?" But my smile promised revenge that would change their lives forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I was packing my tackle box when Lottie walked through my front door without knocking. That should have been the first sign, but I told myself she was in a hurry. Then Stanley followed her inside, and my chest tightened. "Nice place you got here, Zeb." Stanley dropped onto my couch like he owned it, spreading his arms across the back cushions. "Real nice. This neighborhood's gotten pricey, hasn't it?" I kept my hands steady on the fishing line I was coiling. "I've lived here 30 years. Must be sitting on a fortune then." He grinned, showing too many teeth. Lottie moved past me toward the kitchen, her heels clicking against the hardwood her mother and I had refinished together back in '93. She opened the refrigerator without asking, pulled out a bottle of water, twisted the cap with sharp, impatient movements. "Dad, I'll need the keys." She held out her hand like a parking attendant. "For the plants and mail, remember?" "Of course." I set down the tackle box and stood, my knees protesting slightly. "How's work been treating you?" "I quit last month." She took a long drink, not meeting my eyes. "Needed a break." "A break?" I walked toward the mantel where I kept the spare keys in a ceramic bowl Lottie had made in elementary school. "From what?" She sighed, the sound sharp with irritation. "From everything. Stanley and I are figuring things out." Footsteps creaked overhead. I looked up at the ceiling, then at Lottie. "Where is he?" "Probably just using the bathroom." But her face flushed, and she turned away. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. The bathroom door hung open, empty. I found Stanley in my bedroom, standing near the dresser where my wife's jewelry box still sat, untouched for 3 years. He had his phone out, taking a photo of something. "Man, these rooms are huge." He didn't look embarrassed, didn't apologize. "How many bedrooms?" 3. I stayed in the doorway, blocking his exit. "You're in my bedroom." He slipped past me, too close, bringing the smell of cologne and something else. Calculation, maybe, or greed. "Just looking around, no harm in that, right?" I followed him downstairs. Lottie had moved to the living room, examining the family photos on the side table. She picked up one of her mother and set it down carelessly, face down. The gesture hit me harder than any words could. Stanley settled back onto the couch, crossing his ankle over his knee. He tested the cushion with his weight, bouncing slightly. "This furniture's solid, quality stuff." I returned to the mantel and picked up the keys. They felt heavier than they should, like handing over more than just metal and plastic. My wife smiled at me from her frame, the photo taken at Lottie's college graduation. I remembered working double shifts at the plant so Lottie could attend without student loans. Remembered teaching her about integrity, about family, about taking care of what matters. "Dad," Lottie's voice cut through my thoughts. "The keys? I need to get going." I turned to face her. She'd changed so much in the past year. The warmth had drained from her eyes, replaced by something flat and distant. "Why don't we have dinner before I leave? Just us two?" "Can't. Stanley has plans for us." She stepped forward, hand extended again. "Here, give me the keys." "What about tomorrow morning?" I heard the pleading note in my voice and hated it. "Dad, stop." She snatched the keys from my palm. "You're being clingy." Stanley stood, stretched, looked around my living room one more time with those assessing eyes. He touched the lamp near the window, tilted the shade to check the maker's mark on the base. He ran his hand along the bookshelf, testing its stability. They moved toward the door together. Stanley paused on the threshold, looking back at everything. The furniture, the photos, the space itself. His gaze lingered on the ceiling, as if calculating square footage. "See you in 2 weeks, Zeb." Not Mr., not Sir. Just Zeb, like we were equals, like he had any right to that familiarity. The door closed, their voices carried through the window as they walked to the car. Lottie's laugh bright and cruel in the evening air. An engine started. Taillights disappeared down the street. I stood in my living room, my home of 3 decades, and felt like a stranger. The silence pressed against my ears. The tackle box sat half-packed on the floor. bright lures scattered across the coffee table, like warning signs I'd failed to read. My phone was in my hand before I'd consciously decided to call. Marcus Wayland answered on the second ring, his voice warm with familiarity. "Zeb, ready for your fishing trip?" "Marcus, I need to confirm something." I sat down heavily in my recliner. "The trust documents we set up last year, they're still valid?" "Of course they are." His tone shifted, professional concern replacing casual friendliness. "The house is held by Wayland and Associates as trustee. You have full living rights, but the property can't be transferred or sold without my approval as trustee. Why are you worried?" I watched the last of the sunset fade through my window, painting the walls orange and red. "Something's wrong. I can feel it." "Your instincts have always been good, Zeb." Papers rustled on his end. "The house is protected. They can't touch it without going through me, and I won't authorize anything without your explicit consent." "That's what concerns me." I picked up my wife's photo, ran my thumb across the glass. "Why would they want to?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You're leaving tomorrow morning?" "Sunrise. Call me if anything feels off, and Zeb." He paused. "Trust your gut. It saved you before." After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and whispers. Everything looked the same furniture, same photos, same rooms I'd painted and repaired and lived in for half my life. But something had shifted, something had broken. I resumed packing, mechanical now, hands moving through familiar motions while my mind spun through possibilities I didn't want to consider. The tackle box clicked shut. The fishing rod leaned against the wall, ready for morning. Everything prepared for a trip I suddenly dreaded taking. But I would go. I would leave my house in Lottie's care because she was my daughter, and some part of me still wanted to believe I'd raised her better than what I'd just witnessed. Some part of me still hoped I was wrong. The next morning, I loaded my truck before sunrise. The street was empty, houses dark, just the way I'd left for fishing trips 100 times before. But my hands shook slightly as I secured the cooler in the bed, and I checked my rearview mirror 3 times before pulling away. Crater Lake stretched before me like hammered silver when I arrived, the July sun turning the water into something almost painful to look at. I set up camp in my usual spot, away from the main clusters of RVs and families. Other fishermen nodded in greeting. Someone's radio played country music at low volume. Normal, everything perfectly normal. I cast my line that first afternoon and felt some of the tension ease from my shoulders. The water was cold and clear. Trout moved in the shallows. A hawk circled overhead, patient and watchful. That evening I sent Lottie a text. "Made it safe. Beautiful weather here." Her response came quickly. "Good. Have fun." The next 4 days followed the same pattern. I fished in the mornings when the lake was calm, read paperbacks in my camp chair during the heat of afternoon, cooked simple meals over my portable stove. Lottie answered my messages promptly. She sent photos of my kitchen plants, their leaves green and healthy in the sunlight through the window. "How are the plants looking?" I texted on the 3rd day. "All good, watered yesterday." The photo showed my African violet on the windowsill, exactly where I'd left it. "Thanks, honey. Everything okay with you?" "Fine. Enjoy your trip." I tried to relax into the rhythm of vacation, tried to convince myself that the unease from that last evening had been overreaction, an old man's paranoia. Other campers invited me to join their evening fire. I declined politely, preferring solitude, but their laughter carried across the distance, and I found it almost comforting, life continuing normally while I wrestled with doubts. Then the 6th day arrived, July 21st, and everything changed. My morning text went unanswered. I told myself she was sleeping in, busy with errands, anything reasonable, but afternoon came and my call went straight to voicemail. Evening brought a response finally, just one word. "Busy." The knot in my stomach returned, tighter than before. July 22nd, I tried calling 3 times. Lottie answered the 3rd attempt, her voice sharp with irritation. "Lottie, you haven't answered my calls." "I've been busy. What do you want?" The hostility in her tone made me grip the phone harder. "Just checking in. Is everything all right at the house?" "Why wouldn't it be?" She practically spat the words. "You're being paranoid. Can you send me another photo of—" "I have to go." The line went dead. I stared at my phone screen, my reflection ghostly in the black glass. Around me, The campground carried on with its vacation sounds, children playing, someone chopping vegetables, the eternal lap of water against the shore. None of it felt real anymore. July 23rd brought more silence. Text messages delivered but not read. Calls declined immediately. I caught exactly 2 fish and threw them both back, unable to focus on the simple mechanics of the line and lure. My hands felt clumsy. The book I'd been enjoying sat unopened in my chair. A fellow camper approached that evening, a friendly man in his 50s who'd been set up near me all week. "You heading out early? Thought you had another week." "Change of plans." I managed a smile that felt wrong on my face. "Family matter." "Nothing serious, I hope." "Just something I need to handle personally." He nodded, sensing my reluctance to elaborate, and left me alone with the campfire I'd built more for something to do than for warmth. The flames danced and popped. Sparks rose into the darkening sky. I watched them disappear and tried not to think about what might be happening 3 hours away in my empty house. Then, July 24th arrived, and Tom's message came through while I was attempting to eat breakfast I couldn't taste. The photo loaded slowly on my phone's spotty connection. A red Toyota Camry parked in my driveway like it belonged there. The angle was from Tom's yard next door, taken from his kitchen window probably. The message below read, "Thought you should know. Been there 3 days. Lights on late every night." My hands went cold despite the morning warmth. I zoomed in on the photo, studied every pixel. The license plate was visible, but I didn't recognize it. Not Lottie's car, not Stanley's old sedan. Someone else. I typed back immediately. "Thanks, Tom. Do you recognize it?" His response came quickly. "Never seen it before. Want me to knock?" "No, don't approach. I appreciate the heads up." Another message. "Lights are on past midnight. Just seems odd." I sat there with my breakfast growing cold on the paper plate, staring at that photo until my eyes burned. 3 days. The car had been there for 3 days, which meant it arrived July 21st. The same day Lottie stopped answering my calls. The same day everything changed. That evening I built another fire and sat watching it long after the other campers had gone to bed. The lake was black and still. Stars scattered across the sky in patterns I'd learned as a child, but could barely see now with my aging eyes. The wood crackled and shifted, sending up showers of embers that died before they hit the ground. Someone else was in my house. Lottie had handed over access to someone else, or allowed them in, or invited them. However it had happened, a stranger was living in my home, turning on lights late into the night, parking their car in my driveway without shame or secrecy. And Lottie wouldn't answer my calls. I thought about Marcus's words. "The house is protected. They can't touch it without going through me." The trust documents were solid, legally ironclad, but legal protection meant nothing if I didn't know what was happening, if I couldn't reach my daughter, if strangers occupied my home while I sat 3 hours away watching fish and pretending everything was fine. I pulled out my phone and texted Tom, "Don't call anyone. I'm coming home." Then I sat by the dying fire and made my plans. I'd reserved the campsite through July 31st, 2 full weeks of fishing and solitude, but I couldn't wait that long. Couldn't sit here while something terrible unfolded in my absence. I would pack up on the 29th, return 2 days early. Not so rushed that it would alert Lottie if she was watching for such things, but soon enough that I could stop whatever was happening before it progressed too far. The fire burned down to coals. Other campers snored in their tents and RVs. The lake whispered against the shore with its endless patience, and I sat in my camp chair, an old man alone in the darkness, understanding with complete certainty that I was about to walk into something far worse than I'd imagined. 2 days. I could wait 2 days, gather myself, prepare for whatever confrontation awaited. 2 days to be strategic instead of impulsive. 2 days to stop being a victim and start being something else, something they wouldn't expect. 2 days later, I pulled into my neighborhood just as the afternoon light turned golden and heavy. My hands felt steady on the wheel, but my jaw was tight enough to ache. The street looked exactly as I'd left it. Mrs. Chen's rose bushes, the Hendersons' basketball hoop, Tom's carefully edged lawn. Everything familiar and unchanged. Then I saw my house. The red Toyota Camry sat in my driveway like it had been there forever. Next to it, a silver Honda Civic I'd never seen before. 2 vehicles, 2 strangers, maybe more, occupying my property while I'd been catching trout and trying to convince myself everything was fine. I parked at the curb and gathered my phone, left the fishing gear in the truck bed, walked up my own driveway with my house key ready, the metal warm from my pocket. The key stopped halfway into the front door lock. Wrong shape, wrong fit. Someone had changed my locks. I tried again, thinking maybe I'd been using the wrong key, but no. This was my house key, the one I'd carried for 30 years, the one with the slight brass discoloration from 3 decades of use. The cylinder was different now. New hardware, professional installation. I photographed the lock, timestamp, evidence. Around the side of the house, through the narrow space between my property and Tom's fence. The back door key failed the same way. I stood there on my own porch, staring at locks that didn't recognize me anymore, and felt something cold settle in my chest. The living room window gave me a clear view inside. I pressed close to the glass, cupped my hands against the glare. My fishing trophies were gone from the mantle. 30 years of regional competitions, small brass figures of men holding rods, memories of weekends on rivers, replaced by concert posters I didn't recognize. My reading chair, the leather recliner my wife had given me for our 20th anniversary, was missing. Strange jackets hung on the coat rack. Unfamiliar shoes scattered across the floor near the door. In the corner, shoved against the wall like garbage waiting for pickup, sat my belongings. Boxes and bags piled carelessly. I zoomed in with my phone camera, photographed everything. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were perfectly steady. I called Lottie. The phone rang twice before she declined the call. I tried again. Declined. Third attempt. She picked up, irritation sharp in her voice. "What? I'm busy. I'm at the house." I kept my tone level, factual. "My keys don't work." Silence stretched between us. I heard Stanley's voice in the background, asking something I couldn't make out. "And?" Her voice had gone flat, defensive. "And I need you to open the door. Now." Another pause. Movement on her end, footsteps maybe. "I'll be there in an hour." "Lottie, this is my..." She hung up. I stood on my own porch, phone in hand, looking at the door that wouldn't let me in. An hour. She'd said it like she was doing me a favor, like I was the one imposing on her time. I texted Marcus, "Locks changed, they're inside, coming now." His response came immediately. "Don't engage physically, document everything." "Already photographing." "Good, I'm reviewing the trust docs. Call me after you talk to her." I walked back to my truck and repositioned it across the street, where I had a clear view of both the front door and the driveway. Settled into the driver's seat. Checked the photos I'd taken. Clear, time-stamped, undeniable. The lock hardware. The interior through the window. My belongings shoved in the corner like trash. Tom's text arrived. "Saw you pull up. Everything okay?" "Not exactly, but I've got it handled." "Let me know if you need anything." "Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it." I sat there as the afternoon crawled toward evening. Watched my house like I was surveilling a stranger's property. The lights came on inside as the sun dropped lower. Someone moved past the living room window. Male, Stanley probably. Comfortable and casual in stolen space. An hour, she'd said. I could wait. I'd been patient for 34 years, raising her, teaching her, hoping she'd become someone who wouldn't do this. I could wait another hour to see exactly who she'd become instead. My phone showed the photos in my gallery, the changed locks, the violated interior, the proof. Marcus's words echoed, "Document everything." I'd been documenting since the moment I arrived, building a case without even consciously deciding to. Some instinct deeper than thought, preparing for war while my daughter made me wait outside my own home. The house I'd bought with my wife after 15 years of saving. The house where we'd raised Lottie, nursed her through childhood illnesses, celebrated her achievements, mourned together when my wife's cancer came and wouldn't leave. The house I'd stayed in after she died, because leaving would mean abandoning the last place we'd been happy together. And now, strangers walked through those rooms like they owned them, drank from my refrigerator, slept in my beds, changed my locks. I thought about Marcus's assurance from that first night, before I'd left for the fishing trip. The house is protected. They can't touch it without going through me. But they already had touched it. The trust made it illegal, maybe, but they'd done it anyway. And if they'd gone this far, what else were they planning? The sky turned pink, then purple, then deep blue. Streetlights flickered on. My phone showed 6 o'clock. Nearly 2 hours since Lottie had promised 1 hour. Then headlights swept down the street, the silver Honda Civic, the one I'd seen in the driveway earlier. It pulled in beside the red Toyota, and Lottie emerged from the driver's side. Stanley got out of the passenger seat. They were laughing about something, their voices carrying across the quiet evening. They didn't even glance at my truck across the street. I stepped out, crossed the street, walked up my own driveway with measured steps. Lottie saw me and rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes at her own father, standing locked out of his house. "Dad, we need to talk. Come inside. This is my house. Just come in." She turned toward the door, key in hand. "Let's be adults about this." She unlocked the door smoothly. Her key fit perfectly, turned easily, like it belonged there, like mine didn't. She pushed the door open and waved me in with the casual gesture of someone inviting a guest into their own home. I stepped across the threshold and felt 30 years collapse into nothing. Every step revealed a new violation. The kitchen, my coffee maker moved to a different counter, unfamiliar mugs hanging from hooks I'd installed myself. The hallway, family photos removed from the walls, replaced by generic prints of beaches and mountains I'd never visited. The living room, furniture rearranged, my couch angled differently, the TV mounted in a new position. Stanley sprawled across my couch without standing when I entered. His feet rested on my coffee table, ankles crossed. He held one of my beers, condensation dripping onto the wood my wife had carefully maintained with lemon oil for 20 years. He didn't set it on a coaster, just let it pool on the surface. "Want one?" He gestured with the bottle toward the kitchen, like he was the host offering refreshment. I didn't answer, kept cataloging. The remote control moved. A gaming console I didn't own connected to my television. Magazines on the side table I'd never subscribed to. Every detail filed away. Lottie perched on the arm of the couch, casual and comfortable. She looked at me with something like pity, which somehow hurt worse than contempt would have. "Dad, look." She spoke slowly, carefully, like explaining something obvious to someone struggling to understand. "Stanley and I decided we're living here now. You've got way too much space for one person." The words hung in the air between us, not asking, not requesting, informing. "You decided?" I kept my voice neutral. Stanley took a long drink, then set the bottle back on the table without a coaster. The wet ring spread slowly across the wood. "Yeah, it makes sense, Zeb. You're alone, rattling around in all these rooms. We need the space. Where do you suggest I go?" Lottie brightened, like I'd finally asked the right question. "You can move into my apartment. It's not as big as this, but it's enough for you. One person doesn't need 3 bedrooms. I looked at her carefully, searched her face for any sign of the child I'd raised, the girl who'd cried when she'd accidentally stepped on a beetle, who'd spent hours helping her mother plant the garden we'd maintained until cancer made it impossible. Found nothing familiar. "The apartment I bought for you," I said quietly. Her expression hardened. "See, you're always throwing that in my face. Everything's about what you've done, what you've given, what you've sacrificed. I'm stating a fact." Stanley laughed, sharp and dismissive. "Come on, old man. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder than what?" He waved the beer bottle vaguely. "You know what I mean? You're getting old. Smaller place would be easier for you anyway. Stairs getting tough yet?" "I'm 64, not 90. Still." He shrugged. "Face reality, man. You can't keep up this big house forever." I moved further into the room, stood near where my reading chair used to be, the space now empty except for a pile of their jackets on the floor. Refused to sit. Sitting meant accepting hospitality, accepting guest status in my own home. "Your mother and I saved for 15 years to buy this house." I spoke to Lottie, not Stanley, kept my voice level. "We chose this neighborhood for the schools, for you. Don't bring Mom into this." Lottie stood abruptly, her composure cracking slightly. "She'd be ashamed of what you're doing." The words landed hard. Lottie's face flushed, but not with guilt, with anger. "Stop with the manipulation. We're adults. We make our own decisions. You don't get to control everything with guilt trips about the past. Adults pay for their own housing." Stanley leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You're making this into something it's not. We're family. Families help each other. You've got more than you need. We're just redistributing resources." I almost laughed. Redistributing resources, like they were economists instead of thieves. I worked extra shifts at the plant for 12 years to afford your college. I kept my eyes on Lottie. Took every overtime hour I could get. Your mother worked part-time at the library even during treatment, so you wouldn't graduate with debt. Lottie walked to the kitchen, her back to me, and I said thank you many times. But that doesn't mean I owe you my entire life. I'm 34 years old. I deserve to live comfortably. In my house, she spun around. In a house you're not using. You're one person. We're two. It's logical. Stanley nodded along, encouraging. Exactly. And your apartment's fine. It's in a good area. Safe. You'll be comfortable there. I watched them both. Lottie in the kitchen doorway, defensive and entitled. Stanley on the couch, confident and comfortable. They'd clearly rehearsed this, coordinated their arguments, probably practiced during those late nights Tom had mentioned, lights on past midnight while they planned their takeover. When did you change the locks? I asked. Lottie hesitated. That's not important. When? Last week. She lifted her chin. We needed security. Didn't want random people walking in. Random people. I let the words sit there. In my house. Stanley stood finely, stretching. Look, we can go round and round about this all night, but the situation is what it is. We're here, we're staying, you can accept it peacefully, or... He left the threat hanging, incomplete. Or what? He smiled, showing teeth. Or we can make it difficult. Your choice, old man. Lottie returned from the kitchen with a folder, set it on the coffee table, pushing Stanley's beer aside. I contacted a real estate agent, got an estimate on the apartment. You'll have money from selling it, enough to live comfortably for years. You're selling my apartment? My apartment, technically. It's in my name. She was right. I'd put it in her name when I'd bought it. Gift tax considerations and estate planning, trying to protect her future, never imagining she'd use it against me like this. That building has appreciated significantly. She spoke like a realtor now, professional and detached. You'll clear almost $200,000. Plenty to find a nice place, maybe a condo, something more appropriate for your age. Stanley picked up his beer again, took another long drink. We're being generous here, Zeb, letting you stay in the apartment until you find something. Not everyone would be that accommodating. I looked around the room slowly, at my belongings shoved in the corner, at Stanley sprawling on furniture he hadn't earned, at Lottie with her folder and her estimates and her cold calculations about my future. Something shifted inside me. The hurt began transforming into something sharper, cleaner, more useful. I smiled, just slightly, just enough. Lottie noticed. What? Nothing. I kept the smile. You've thought this through carefully. We have. She sounded relieved, like I was finally being reasonable. It makes sense for everyone. For everyone, I repeated, nodded slowly. I'm sure it does. Stanley raised his beer in a mock toast. Now you're getting it, smart man. I looked at him, at his feet still on my coffee table, at the wet rings from his bottle spreading across the wood, at his satisfied smirk and his comfortable sprawl across furniture he thought he owned. Then I looked at Lottie, at her folder of calculations, at her confident stance, at the entitled tilt of her head and the complete absence of shame in her eyes. My smile grew slightly wider. I need to make a phone call, I said quietly. Then we'll talk more. I straightened my shoulders, planted my feet wider. The time for appealing to memory or conscience had passed. Those things didn't exist here anymore. Give me my keys back, pack your things, leave tonight. Stanley stood finally, unfolding from the couch with the lazy confidence of someone who thought he'd already won. He walked toward me, closing the distance until I could smell his cologne and beer breath. Not happening, old-timer. I'm not asking. His smile was sharp, mocking. Neither are we. Go ahead, call the cops. Tell them your daughter's staying in your house. Let's see what they say about family disputes. This isn't a family visit. That's your problem, Zeb. You see, everything is yours. Time to learn how to share. Share what I built. Share what you're too old to need. He gestured around the room like he was already its owner. One person doesn't need all this space. It's wasteful, selfish even. Lottie moved from the kitchen doorway back into the living room, positioning herself beside Stanley. A united front. She'd chosen her side, and it wasn't the one that included the man who'd raised her. Dad, you have options. Her voice had taken on a false sweetness now, like she was humoring a difficult child. Take my apartment, Get your own place with the money from selling it. It's reasonable. And if I don't want either option, she exchanged a glance with Stanley. Something passed between them, a shared joke, a rehearsed moment. Then she looked back at me with that terrible smile. Well, there's always the doghouse out back. The words hung in the air like poison. Remember, Dad, the one we bought for Rex before we decided not to get a dog? She actually gestured toward the backyard, actually pointed at the structure I'd assembled with her help 7 years ago, back when she'd wanted a golden retriever and then changed her mind the next week. It's weatherproof, she continued, and then she giggled. You'd be fine. Stanley's laugh exploded loud and harsh. The doghouse! That's perfect! Lottie's giggles joined his laughter. I mean, if he really wants to stay on the property, better than he deserves, honestly. Stanley was bent over now, hands on his knees, performing his amusement like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. I watched them. My daughter, suggesting I sleep in a structure meant for an animal, my daughter's boyfriend, laughing so hard his face turned red. Both of them finding genuine joy in the image of an old man crawling into a doghouse because his own child had stolen his home. Something inside me shifted, not broke, shifted, like tectonic plates moving beneath the earth, rearranging the landscape of what was possible, what was acceptable, what I was willing to do. The hurt didn't disappear. It transformed, hardened into something cold and clean and useful. I felt my face change. A small smile formed, starting at the corners of my mouth and spreading slowly upward. Not nervous, not sad, knowing. Stanley noticed first. His laughter cut off mid-breath. Wait, why are you smiling? Lottie's giggles faded. She straightened, uncertainty flickering across her features. Dad? What's so funny? I didn't answer immediately. Let them wonder. Let them feel the first whisper of wrongness, the first hint that something in their script had gone off course. Stanley took a step back, his aggressive posture faltering. Answer her. What's funny? My smile widened just slightly. Just enough. You'll see. See what? Lottie's voice had an edge now, sharp with nervousness. Stop being cryptic. But I couldn't stop smiling. Not at their discomfort, though that was satisfying, but at the beautiful, terrible perfection of this moment. They'd shown me exactly who they were, removed any remaining doubt, eliminated any possibility that I might feel guilty about what came next. They'd suggested the doghouse. They'd laughed about it together. They'd crossed the final line, and they'd done it with joy in their voices. And they had no idea what they'd just done to themselves. Stanley crossed his arms over his chest, defensive now, instead of aggressive. Zeb, why are you smiling? Lottie moved closer to him, seeking support. Dad, seriously, this isn't funny. No, I agreed quietly. It's not. But I kept smiling anyway. Because they were right about one thing. I did have options. More options than they could possibly imagine. Options I'd prepared a year ago when I'd first sensed something changing in Lottie. Something hardening in her eyes whenever money came up in conversation. Options that were about to become their problem. Stanley's face had gone from red with laughter to pale with confusion. Lottie's hand found his arm, gripping tight. They looked at each other, then back at me. Both of them trying to understand why their victim wasn't crying, or shouting, or begging. Why he was standing there with that small, satisfied smile, instead of breaking the way they'd expected. What did you do? Lottie's voice was barely above a whisper. Nothing yet, I said, but I'm about to. I reached into my pocket slowly, deliberately, pulled out my phone, unlocked it while maintaining eye contact with them. They watched frozen as I opened my messages, as I typed without looking at the screen, as I hit send and returned the phone to my pocket. Who did you text? Stanley demanded. My attorney. The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples of realization spreading across their faces. What attorney? But Lottie's voice had lost its confidence. She knew I had one. Had met Marcus Wayland at her mother's funeral 3 years ago. Had probably assumed he was just there as a friend from the fishing club. The one who's been waiting for my call. I took a step forward, not aggressive, just shifting my weight, changing the dynamics of the room. The one I contacted the night you first came to pick up those keys. Stanley's jaw tightened. You're bluffing. Am I? Lottie shook her head, denial written across her face. Dad, what are you talking about? What attorney? The one who set up the trust, I said simply. A year ago. The confusion in their eyes was almost worth the pain of the last 2 weeks, almost worth the violation of coming home to change locks and strangers in my house. Almost. What trust? Lottie's voice cracked slightly. I looked at her, really looked at her, and wondered where my daughter had gone. When had she transformed into this person who could laugh about putting her father in a doghouse? Who could stand beside a man who called me old-timer and think it was acceptable? I need to tell you something about this house, I said quietly. They were both staring now, waiting. The laughter from moments ago had evaporated completely, replaced by something that looked like the beginning of fear. Good. This house, I continued, doesn't actually belong to me. What are you talking about? Lottie's voice climbed higher, sharper. What nonsense? A year ago, I interrupted calmly, I established an irrevocable trust through my attorney, Marcus Wayland. Stanley's face shifted through several expressions: confusion, dismissal, then something that might have been the first flash of genuine concern. A what? An irrevocable trust. The house is held by Wayland and Associates. I have living rights, but I cannot transfer the property without the trustee's written consent and verified signature. That's ridiculous. But Lottie's protest sounded hollow, uncertain. Actually, it's completely legal. You can verify it yourself through Washington County land records, public information. I watched the implications work through their minds. Watched Stanley's arms uncross and drop to his sides. Watched Lottie's hand go to her throat, a gesture of unconscious defense. That's illegal, Stanley's voice cracked on the last word. No, it's estate planning, quite common actually. Protects assets from exactly this kind of situation. I shifted my weight, took a casual step while I spoke. Nothing aggressive, just moving naturally through the space. Ended up positioned between them and the front door. Neither of them noticed immediately, too focused on processing what I'd just told them. What situation? Lottie's face had gone pale. What are you saying? I'm saying that, right now, both of you are unlawful occupants of a property held in trust. I never gave you permission to change the locks. Never gave you permission to move in. I only asked you to water plants and collect mail. I'm your daughter. She said it like that made everything permissible. You're an adult who changed locks on property she doesn't own. Property she never could own because it's held in trust. I kept my voice level, factual. No anger, just information. Every text message I sent from the lake asked about the plants. Never mentioned you staying here. Never gave any indication this was acceptable. Stanley took a step forward, but his heart wasn't in it. His earlier aggression had evaporated. We have rights. Family law applies to family disputes over shared property. This isn't shared. You have no legal claim, no ownership, no tenancy agreement. You're trespassers. The word hung in the air. Trespassers. Lottie shook her head rapidly, denial written across every line of her face. No, that can't. You're making this up. Call Marcus Wayland if you don't believe me. His office number is listed, or check the county records yourself. The trust was filed 13 months ago. Everything documented, everything legal. Stanley's face had gone from pale to ashen. This is entrapment. This is preparation. There's a difference. I allowed my smile to return, just slightly. I hoped I was wrong about you both. Hoped I was being paranoid. But I'm 64 years old, and I've learned to trust my instincts. You can't do this. But Lottie's voice had lost all its earlier confidence. She sounded young suddenly, frightened, like the child she'd been before Stanley and his influences had reshaped her. I already did, last year, before any of this happened, before I even knew how bad it would get. I looked at Stanley. Before I knew you'd suggest I sleep in a doghouse. His face flushed red, but not with anger this time. With shame, maybe, or the realization of how thoroughly he'd miscalculated. The trust protects my right to live here until I die. After that, the property transfers to a charity, not to family, not to anyone who might contest it. It's done, final, irrevocable. That's what the word means. Lottie's hand found Stanley's arm again, gripping it like a lifeline. Dad, please, we can fix this. We can... Fix what? The fact that you changed my locks? That you moved strangers into my house? That you laughed about putting me in a doghouse? She flinched at each question like physical blows. I have the text messages saved, time-stamped, screenshots backed up to 3 different locations. Your responses, my requests. Everything that proves you exceeded the simple favor I asked. Stanley tried one more time, but his voice had lost all its earlier swagger. You're our family? You wouldn't actually call the police? I finished for him. Report trespassing, illegal lock changes, theft of property. I paused. Why wouldn't I? The silence stretched. Through the window, I could see Tom's porch light across the street. Normal life continuing while everything in this house shifted and realigned. Here's what's going to happen. I spoke quietly, but with absolute certainty. You're going to pack your belongings. You're going to return my keys. You're going to restore my property to exactly how you found it. And you're going to do it tonight. We need time, Stanley started. You don't have time. You have the next hour to undo what you've done. After that, I call the police and report a break-in. Let them sort out how you got in, who changed the locks, why my belongings are shoved in a corner like garbage. Lottie's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't let myself care. Not after the doghouse. Not after she'd chosen Stanley over her own father. Not after she'd violated every value I'd taught her. An hour? Her voice broke. 60 minutes, starting now. I glanced at my phone. 7:43. Be gone by 8:43 or face the consequences. Stanley pulled Lottie closer, whispered something I couldn't hear. She shook her head, whispered back. A brief, urgent conversation that excluded me entirely, which was fine. They could plan all they wanted. The trust was real. The evidence was documented, and Marcus Wayland was already preparing whatever legal actions came next. I'd spent a year hoping I was wrong about them. A year wishing my daughter would prove my paranoia unfounded. A year wanting to believe in the person I'd raised instead of the person she'd become. But hope was expensive, and I'd finally run out of currency to pay for it. Stanley straightened, tried to summon some dignity. We'll go, but this isn't over. Yes, I said simply. It is. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned away. Pulled Lottie with him toward the stairs. Toward the bedrooms where they'd been sleeping in my house, using my furniture, living my life. I stayed where I was, positioned near the door, watched them climb the stairs, heard their footsteps overhead, hurried and panicked now, instead of confident and comfortable. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Received, documents ready, standing by. I typed back, they're packing, 1 hour deadline. His response came immediately. I'll be there in 30 minutes, just in case. Just in case they tried something stupid. Just in case an hour wasn't enough. Just in case I needed backup when they realized exactly how trapped they were. I looked around my living room, my belongings still shoved in the corner, their jackets still on my coat rack, evidence of their occupation everywhere. But it didn't matter anymore. They were leaving. They had to leave, because this house wasn't mine to give them, even if I'd wanted to. And after the doghouse comment, I'd never wanted anything less. Stanley's eyes darted to the door where I stood. Lottie looked around the room frantically, searching for another way out. The reality was settling over them like concrete, heavy, inescapable, hardening with every second. Get out of my way. Stanley moved toward me, 2 steps, then stopped when I didn't budge. Your way? Move! His voice cracked on the word, desperation bleeding through the aggression. I held up the key, the one that still worked from inside the house. Let him see it between my thumb and forefinger. You can leave when Marcus arrives with the paperwork, or call the police yourself. I'd be happy to explain everything to them. You're bluffing. Am I? I checked my phone, made a show of noting the time. They should be here in about 10 minutes. Criminal trespass, illegal lock change. I have all the evidence they need. Lottie's phone slipped in her trembling hand. You didn't. I already did. I looked at her directly. This stopped being a family matter when you suggested I sleep in a doghouse. Her face crumpled. Dad, you can't. I already have. Stanley grabbed her arm, fingers digging into her sleeve. Come on, now. Where? She looked around wildly. Out! Police are coming. But, move! He dragged her toward the living room window, yanked it open so hard the frame cracked, wood splintering under the force, threw himself through the opening, landing hard in the yard below. Stumbled, caught himself, turned back for Lottie. She hesitated at the windowsill, one leg already through, the other still inside my house. Looked back at me with tears streaming down her face. Dad? Get out! Please! Her voice broke completely. You wanted to live here. You lived here, now leave. She had no words left. Just sobs. She climbed through the window awkwardly, her skirt catching on the frame, her tights tearing with a sound like ripping paper. Stanley pulled her the rest of the way. Not gentle, just urgent. I walked to the window and watched them run across the yard. Lottie stumbled in her torn tights. Stanley half carried, half dragged her toward the driveway. Car doors slammed. Engines roared to life. Too loud, too desperate. The red Toyota backed out first, tires screaming against asphalt. The silver Honda followed, almost clipping my mailbox. They were still visible down the street when red and blue lights appeared around the corner. A patrol car pulled smoothly into my driveway, replacing the spaces their vehicles had just vacated. Perfect timing, almost too perfect. Marcus must have called the moment he received my text. I stayed at the window, watching. Didn't go outside, didn't wave or signal. Just observed as the officers stepped out of their vehicle, noticed the open window, the knocked-over lamp visible through the glass, the evidence of panicked flight. One officer approached the front door. I opened it before he could knock. Sir, we received a call about trespassing. Yes, I'm Zebediah Gonzalez. I own this property. I stepped aside. Come in, I have documentation. They spent the next 30 minutes recording everything, photographed the new locks while I showed them my keys, the ones that no longer fit. Documented my belongings piled in the corner like refuse. Took notes as I explained calmly, methodically, exactly what had happened. So they changed your locks while you were out of town? Without permission. I asked my daughter to water plants, nothing more. I pulled out my phone, showed them the text messages. You can see here, I never authorized residence. And these are your belongings? The younger officer gestured to the corner. Everything I own, shoved aside to make room for their things. The senior officer made another note. You did the right thing calling us, sir. This is clear-cut trespassing. The subjects who fled, you know them? My daughter Lottie and her boyfriend Stanley Crow. We'll need their full information for the report. I provided everything. Full names, Lottie's address, vehicle descriptions, license plates. Tom had captured those in his photo, and I'd memorized them. They left after confirming I was safe, alone, and had someone coming to help change the locks back. Marcus arrived 10 minutes after they departed, leather briefcase in hand, expression professionally concerned, but eyes sharp with satisfaction. You called the police before texting me, he observed. I texted you first. You called them. He smiled slightly. The timing was fortunate. Very. I looked around my violated living room. What's next? Now, we file the paperwork, make everything official, and we make sure they understand exactly what they've done. I nodded slowly. The window still hung open, evening air flowing through the gap. I could close it later. For now, I wanted to remember this moment, watching them flee through glass and frame, running from consequences they had spent weeks building for themselves. They'd laughed about the doghouse, performed their cruelty with joy. Now they were running, and I was standing in my house, exactly where I belonged, while officers documented their crimes and attorneys prepared their reckoning. Justice didn't always need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needed a plan and a window. The next few days turned into a nightmare for Lottie and Stanley. For me, they were satisfying in their precision. Marcus filed the eviction notice with Washington County Court on July 31st, 2 days after their window escape. The civil suit for property damages followed immediately. $3,200 for lock replacement, damaged property, and legal fees. Every item itemized, every dollar justified with photographs I'd taken that first evening. You prepared for this, Marcus observed when I delivered my evidence folder to his office. Digital and physical copies, organized chronologically, cross-referenced. I hoped I wouldn't need to. But you were ready anyway. He flipped through the photos. This is the most organized client documentation I've seen in 20 years. I worked quality control at the plant for 34 years. Attention to detail was my job. He nodded, already drafting legal language that would transform my photographs into courtroom exhibits. Lottie started calling on August 1st, 15 times over 3 days. I didn't answer. Listened to each voicemail once, saved them all, deleted nothing. The first messages were angry. How could you do this? I'm your daughter. By the second day, they turned pleading. Dad, pick up, please. We can fix this. On the third day, she was sobbing. I made a mistake. Stanley pressured me. Please call me back. I'm begging you. I played them for Marcus on speakerphone. Save these, he said. Everything's evidence. Stanley tried a different approach. Showed up at Marcus's office on August 4th, demanding a meeting. The receptionist called security. He lasted 5 minutes in the lobby before 2 guards escorted him out. Marcus screenshotted Stanley's subsequent social media rants, potential harassment evidence, should we need it. That same afternoon, Stanley met with an attorney, William Chen, small practice in a strip mall, probably advertised on bus benches. I didn't know this directly. Lottie mentioned it in voicemail number 12, the one where she said, "We talked to a lawyer, and he says you have to drop the charges." Marcus laughed when I played him that one. No lawyer told them that. He probably told them they're finished and they chose to hear something else. He was right. Through channels I won't detail, I learned that Chen had reviewed the trust documents, the property records, and the police report. His advice was blunt. You have no case. Settle whatever they want and hope they don't press charges. Stanley threw the papers on the ground and slammed out of Chen's office. The attorney charged him $200 for 30 minutes of truth. On August 5th, I filed paperwork with the major credit bureaus. CR 121 form, removal of the cosigner obligation. I'd guaranteed Lottie's apartment mortgage 5 years ago when she couldn't qualify a loan. The bank received notification within 24 hours. Their algorithm was merciless. Unemployed borrower. Lottie had quit her job 8 months ago, cohabitating with someone carrying $23,000 in credit card debt. No income verification. No assets. Cosigner removed. The letter arrived on August 6th. Mortgage reassessment required. Current payment structure unsustainable. Contact us within 10 days. Lottie called again that evening. Voicemail number 14. She wasn't even forming complete sentences anymore, just crying and breathing and occasionally managing words like please and can't and foreclosure. I saved it with the others. Marcus and I met for coffee on August 7th. His office, good espresso machine, comfortable chairs. He laid out the timeline. Eviction hearing is September 2nd. Damage suit hearing is October 15th. The DA received the police report and is reviewing for criminal charges, probably simple trespassing, maybe criminal mischief for the lock changes. And Lottie's apartment? Bank initiated foreclosure proceedings yesterday. Standard timeline is 90 days, but they're fast-tracking because she has no income to negotiate with. He sipped his espresso. They'll lose the apartment by November. And Stanley's debts? Following him everywhere. No job, no assets, collection agencies have his number. He's drowning. Marcus set down his cup. You've systematically dismantled their entire lives in 1 week. They did that themselves. I just stopped protecting them from consequences. Still, it's impressive in its completeness. I thought about the Doghouse comment, about Lottie's giggles and Stanley's cruel laughter, about coming home to change locks and my belongings shoved in a corner. They earned every bit of this, I said quietly. Marcus didn't disagree. That afternoon, Lottie appeared on my porch. I saw her through the window, sitting on the steps, head in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. She stayed for an hour. Neighbors watched. Mrs. Chen brought her a glass of water, which Lottie accepted but didn't drink. I didn't go outside. Eventually she stood, looked at my door one last time, left the water glass on the step, walked slowly to her car, not the silver Honda, that was Stanley's, and drove away. The glass sat there for 2 days before I brought it inside, washed it, put it away with the others, erased even that small evidence of her presence. The legal machinery continued grinding. Marcus filed motions. Courts issued summons. Process servers delivered papers. Stanley stopped answering his phone. Lottie kept calling mine, though less frequently now, only once or twice a day instead of 5 or 6. Her voicemails had changed character. No more anger, no more pleading, just quiet desperation. Dad, I don't know what to do. Stanley's talking about leaving. The bank says we have to be out by the end of the month. I don't have anywhere to go. I know I don't deserve your help. I know that. But I'm still your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything? I played it for Marcus. Does it? He asked. Mean anything? I thought about my wife, dying slowly while Lottie was away at college. How she'd asked me to take care of our daughter, to make sure she had opportunities. How I'd worked double shifts and saved every penny and bought that apartment so Lottie would have a foundation, security, a place to start building her life. I thought about how Lottie had repaid that gift, by suggesting I sleep in a doghouse, by laughing while her boyfriend mocked my age, by stealing my home while I was away. "No," I said finally. "It doesn't mean anything anymore." Marcus nodded and made a note in his file. Probably something about my continued resolve, my unwillingness to compromise. Evidence that I was serious about following this through to completion. The eviction hearing was 26 days away. The damage suit 40 days beyond that. The foreclosure grinding forward on its own timeline, impersonal and inevitable. And somewhere in that chaos, Stanley was planning his exit. I could feel it. The way Lottie's voicemails mentioned him less. The way her panic was becoming solitary instead of plural. He'd pressured her into this scheme, convinced her it was smart and fair and justified. Now he was preparing to leave her with the wreckage. That was fine. Let him run. Let her face everything alone. I'd faced my wife's death alone, while Lottie made excuses about why she couldn't visit more often. I'd faced my daughter's betrayal alone when she'd handed my keys to a man who saw me as an obstacle instead of a person. She could face the consequences alone, too. Justice wasn't always kind, but it was always fair. By August 10th, the final bank warning arrived at Lottie's apartment. She opened the envelope with trembling hands, unfolded the letter, saw the bold type across the top. Final notice. The words were clinical, impersonal. 30 days to secure a qualified co-signer, or the property would enter foreclosure proceedings. She read it 3 times, as if repetition might change the meaning. Stanley watched from the couch, saying nothing. "What do we do?" Her voice barely carried across the room. He took the letter, scanned it quickly. This is your mortgage, your name, your problem. Stanley, I'm not on this loan, Lottie. I can't help you. But he could have. He could have stayed. He could have tried. Instead, she watched something close behind his eyes, a decision made in silence, a door closing she couldn't see yet. They visited 2 attorneys over the next 2 days. The first consultation lasted 3 minutes before the lawyer stopped them mid-sentence. "This is worse than frivolous. It's delusional. Your father protected his property legally. You violated it illegally. There's no case here." The second attorney, cheaper office in a strip mall, delivered the same verdict with marginally more patience. "Mathematics isn't in your favor. He has documentation, trust records, police report. You have excuses. Leave before I waste more of your time." Stanley threw the papers on the ground outside that second office. Lottie picked them up, folded them carefully, carried them home, like evidence of her own foolishness. August 15th arrived without warning. Lottie woke to find Stanley's side of the bed cold. Not unusual, he sometimes rose early. She made coffee, moved through her morning routine, then noticed his shoes were gone from the entry, checked the closet, empty hangers swaying slightly. Bathroom, no toothbrush. Kitchen counter, a note. 5 words in his careless scrawl. "This isn't working. Good luck." Her knees gave out. She sat on the kitchen floor, reading those words over and over. Good luck. As if luck had anything to do with it. As if he hadn't convinced her this was a smart plan. As if he hadn't promised they'd handle her father together. Good luck. 2 words that meant she was alone with everything. The legal bills, the impossible mortgage, the shattered relationship with the only parent she had left. She tried calling him. Disconnected number. Checked his social media. Accounts deleted. He'd vanished completely, efficiently, leaving her with the wreckage he'd helped create. The next 4 days blurred together. She didn't leave the apartment except for one disastrous grocery trip, where she saw a former coworker and fled in the opposite direction, abandoning her half-filled cart. Applications for cashier positions, barista work, anything, submitted from her laptop in a dim apartment with curtains drawn, phone on silent, mail unchecked, crying at irregular intervals for no specific reason and every reason simultaneously. On August 20th, she drove to Beaverton, to her childhood home, to the house she'd violated and lost. She sat in her car across the street for 10 minutes, gathering courage that kept slipping away. The house looked exactly as she remembered from childhood. Solid, permanent, safe, everything she'd thrown away. Finally, she crossed the street. Knocked once, softly. Knocked again, harder when no one answered immediately. The door opened. Her father stood there, face unreadable. Older somehow. Or maybe she just saw him clearly for the first time in months. All the rationalization Stanley had fed her, that her father was selfish, that he had too much space, that family meant sharing, dissolved in the reality of his expression. Not angry, not hurt, just waiting. "Dad, I'm so sorry." The words tumbled out before she could plan them. "I wasn't thinking clearly. Stanley convinced me it made sense, and I believed him because—" She stopped, choking on tears. "Stanley's gone? He left, took everything and left." "Unsurprising." His tone was flat, factual. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm your daughter. That has to mean something. I made a terrible mistake. I see that now. Please, Dad, I'll do anything." He was quiet for a long moment, studying her, maybe, or just deciding if her remorse was real or performed. "You learned something from this," he said finally. "That's worth something." "I did. I swear I did. If you want forgiveness, real forgiveness, not just words, you need to earn it." His voice was measured, careful. "Find a job, any honest work. Repay the $850 you cost me in locks." "I will, I promise. In 1 year, if you've kept that promise, we'll talk. Maybe. Prove you've changed, not with apologies, with actions. A year? You get what you earn now, nothing more." He stepped back, began closing the door. She stood on the porch, wanting to argue, to plead, to make him understand she needed help now. But she'd forfeited her right to demand anything. The door closed with a soft click. Final. Fair. She stood there for 30 seconds, maybe a minute, then walked back to her car, drove back to the apartment that wouldn't be hers much longer, and sat in the parking lot trying to figure out how to build a life from rubble. Her phone buzzed, bank notification, mortgage payment due in 5 days. She looked at her checking account balance. Not enough. Wouldn't ever be enough. She opened a job search app and started scrolling. Fred Meyer was hiring cashiers, starting wage $16.50. Humiliating after years of office work, after her father had paid for her college degree so she could do better than retail, but better than nothing, better than giving up. She submitted the application, then another, sent out 15 applications before the sun set. One of them had to respond. One of them had to give her a chance to start earning back what she'd lost. Stanley's note still sat on her kitchen counter. She picked it up, crumpled it, threw it in the trash. Good luck. She didn't need luck. She needed work. She needed time. She needed her father to see that she could change, could become someone worth forgiving. The apartment felt enormous and empty without Stanley's presence, but also clearer somehow, like his absence removed a fog she hadn't known was there. She'd let him convince her that her father was the obstacle, that taking the house made sense, that family was about taking what you deserved. She'd learned what she actually deserved, and it wasn't this apartment. Wasn't her father's house, wasn't anything she hadn't earned herself. 1 year, $850. Proof of change, simple terms, impossible terms. The only terms she'd get. She could meet them, or she could lose her father forever. The choice was hers. Finally, truly hers. By August 25th, the formality of the court date arrived. Washington County Courthouse, room 214. Zeb sat beside Marcus on the plaintiff's side. Across the aisle, Lottie and her court-appointed advisor occupied their table. Stanley's empty chair beside them spoke volumes. The judge entered, reviewed the case file without ceremony. Her voice was neutral, efficient, just another case in a long docket. Case number 2025 CV 8847, Gonzalez versus Gonzalez and Crow. I've reviewed the evidence. She shuffled papers, marked something with her pen. The property is held in trust, properly documented. Defendants changed locks without authorization. Plaintiff's damages are itemized and reasonable. She looked at Lottie directly. Ms. Gonzalez, do you contest these findings? No, Your Honor. Judgment for plaintiff, $3,200. Eviction order made permanent. Warrant issued for Mr. Crow's failure to appear. The gavel fell. 28 minutes, courthouse to conclusion. Justice didn't need drama. Outside on the courthouse steps, Marcus reviewed the documents. Stanley's not coming back. Warrant's out, but they won't pursue across state lines for this level of charge. He got away with it. I watched traffic pass on the street below. He's running. That's not getting away. That's living in fear of every traffic stop, every background check. You're going home to your house. Fair point. Lottie sold her apartment within 2 days. Quick sale to an investor, below market value. I heard about it through Marcus, who heard through channels I didn't ask about. She used the proceeds to pay the court judgment and clear some of Stanley's debts that had somehow ended up in her name. $23,000 in credit card charges she hadn't made, but had co-signed for. Another lesson learned the expensive way. I spent the next 2 days restoring my house. Not cleaning, restoring. Each item returned to its exact position. Each mark on the walls patched and painted. Each scratch on the floor carefully refinished. The fishing trophies went back to the mantle one at a time. First trophy, 1998, Lake Oswego, 14-pound trout. I'd been 42, still working at the plant, my wife still healthy. Second trophy, 2003, Crater Lake. My biggest catch, the one she'd photographed, the one I'd wanted to mount, but she'd said the trophy was enough. Third, fourth, fifth. Each had its story, its place, its meaning. The house remembered where things belonged. So did I. My phone buzzed while I was positioning the final trophy. Bank notification, deposit of $100. Reference, Lottie Gonzalez, locks repayment. Below it, a text message appeared. Dad, I found work. Starting payments. I'm sorry. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed again. Settled on. Good. Keep going. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Just acknowledgement. Keep proving yourself. Keep working. Keep learning. We'll see what a year brings. Marcus arrived on August 30th with a manila folder. Trust dissolution papers, property deed restored to my name alone. The protective measure no longer needed. The threat had passed, fled across state lines with a warrant following slowly behind. We sat in my living room, now fully restored to exactly how it should be. Marcus poured whiskey, the good bottle I'd been saving, 2 fingers each. He raised his glass. To planning ahead, I raised mine. To principles, we drank. The whiskey was smooth, expensive, worth the wait. Think she'll actually change? Marcus asked after a moment. Don't know, but she has the chance. That's more than she gave me. You could have destroyed her completely. I'm not trying to destroy, just teach. Difference between revenge and justice. Exactly that. We sat in companionable silence, watching the evening light fade through the windows. The house settled around us with familiar sounds, boards creaking slightly, refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the eternal small noises of a home that's lived in and loved. My wife's photograph watched from the mantel, surrounded by the trophies she'd helped me win through years of patient support. Early mornings when she'd wake with me, packed lunches for fishing trips, celebrated catches and consoled losses, she'd taught Lottie about consequences too, about earning what you received, about respecting the sacrifices parents made. She would have approved this lesson, not the pain, she'd have hated that, but the teaching. Actions have consequences. Respect must be earned. Forgiveness follows change, not just apologies. What about the criminal charges? Marcus asked, finishing his whiskey. DA declined to prosecute, said the civil judgment and Stanley's warrant were sufficient. Lottie cooperated fully with the court, showed genuine remorse. They saw no public benefit in criminal charges. Merciful of them. Or practical. She's not a danger, just made terrible choices influenced by a terrible person. Marcus stood, collected his empty glass. I should go. Paul is making dinner. I walked him to the door, shook his hand. Thank you for everything. You did the work a year ago, Zeb. I just executed your plan. After he left, I stood in my living room, my house, my space, my sanctuary restored, everything in its place, order maintained, justice served without cruelty, consequences delivered without destruction. My phone buzzed again, another message from Lottie. Fred Meyer hired me, cashier position, starting tomorrow, making this right. I replied, one day at a time. She'd learn, or she wouldn't. She'd change, or she wouldn't. Either way, I'd given her something more valuable than forgiveness. I'd given her accountability, the chance to earn back what she'd lost through her own effort, her own growth, her own transformation. The sun set completely. I turned on a lamp, picked up a book I'd been reading before the fishing trip, before the locks changed, before everything fell apart and rebuilt itself stronger. Outside, the neighborhood settled into evening routines. Tom's porch light came on across the street. Mrs. Chen's television flickered blue through her front window. Normal life, continuing like it always had, like it always would. I'd won. Not because I'd destroyed my daughter or ruined Stanley. He'd done that himself by running. I'd won because I stood in my home, with my dignity intact, my principles uncompromised, my justice served without becoming the villain. Sometimes revenge is loud, explosive, dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, and firm. Sometimes it's just refusing to be a victim, planning ahead, and letting consequences be the teacher. I opened my book and began reading where I'd left off weeks ago. The story was still there, waiting. Just like everything else worth keeping. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.